We have never done this before. We have a father-son team today, and they are both entrepreneurs of very, very different ventures. And so the theme today is about the evolution of a CEO. We have one CEO from a high-tech medical technology company and one from a Web 2.0 hot startup. And I want to give you a little bit of background. John Adler here to my left is a neurosurgeon at Stanford Medical School. Now, for most people, that would be a big enough job. But John realized that there were some huge opportunities, and actually some problems that he turned into opportunities, of trying to figure out how to make neurosurgery minimally invasive. And so he founded a company called Accuray that has a product called the CyberKnife, and he'll tell us a little bit about it in a minute. We also then have Trip, his son, who of course grew up in the same household, watched this all happening, and was still willing to go off and start a company as soon as he graduated from Harvard. So he graduated from Harvard in 2006 with a degree in biophysics, and then went off to go start the company Scribd, which is, I would say, one of the most exciting startup companies in the Valley and maybe in the world. It has been named by Business Week as one of the most intriguing startups, and Forbes called it one of the hottest startups. So they have millions of documents, tens of millions of visitors, and he's going to tell us a little bit about it. So why don't we start with you, Trip? Why don't you tell us just a little bit of story about Scribd and give us a little bit of context?
Sure. I guess I'll start by telling you guys just how I got here, because just 3 years ago I was about the age of most of you guys, because I was a senior at Harvard, and at the time I was looking for what I was going to do next after college, and most of my friends were getting conventional jobs. A lot of my friends from Harvard were going into things like investment banking and management consulting, and I decided to just experiment for a little bit and try something crazy. I thought I'd start a company. At the time it felt really, really crazy, and I felt like I was taking a huge risk. I think the only thing that would probably made me willing to do it was probably my dad's influence. But eventually, started going on this path. I met another guy from Harvard who was a computer science major named Jared, and two of us just started playing with some different website ideas. Eventually, we applied to Y Combinator. I'm sure many of you guys have heard of Y Combinator. Have you guys? Raise your hand if you've heard of Y Combinator. Okay, so most people. So we applied to Y Combinator, which is this incubator in Boston. They gave us $12,000. We worked on a certain idea there. It was a college classified site that we launched at Harvard. It got moderately successful, but then we realized it wasn't really what we wanted to do. It wasn't going to be the big company, so we scratched that idea. We tried a bunch of other ideas. Finally, we got to Scribd, which was originally inspired by talking to my dad, who had a medical paper that he wanted to publish. And in medical publishing, it takes, you can say better than I do, but a long time to get published, like a year or two. And he just needed to share this paper with his colleagues. So we decided to build a site that would let him really easily publish his paper. And then we decided to broaden this to all kinds of written material. So books and magazines and school papers and short stories and PowerPoint presentations, any kind of written material. So we built this site. We launched it from an apartment in San Francisco. It basically just took off overnight, became a top 1,500 website in the first 2 days. At that point, I guess this entrepreneur path started to feel a little bit better because venture capitalists started stalking us and chasing us down. So we ended up agreeing to a $3.5 million round from Redpoint. Since then, we raised another $10 million from Charles River Ventures. We've been doubling in size every 6 months or so. We're now getting about 50 million users. We have about 35 billion words of text, making us about 10 times the size of Wikipedia in terms of quantity of content. We have about 40 employees, office in San Francisco. I guess that's probably enough about me.
Pretty cool story. So, John, I'm sure starting a med tech company was exactly the same.
I mean, it hurts me to hear some of Trip's story because my story is so completely different. I started Accuray back in 1991 and had venture capitalists running the other direction when I came their way. I was a pariah on Sand Hill Road trying to raise money because everyone thought my company should just die. But after a very difficult course, the company became a reality and became public 3 years ago, almost exactly 3 years ago. And what Accuray does is it makes a very, very precise, non-invasive, robotically controlled, non-invasive surgical tool that lets us destroy tumors now really anywhere in the body. And by virtue of the kind of the principles, we don't just destroy tumor, we can destroy tissue and change the function of tissue anywhere in the body, which gets increasingly interesting not just in cancer, but things like heart surgery and even brain surgery and the psychiatric disorders. So Accuray has been was a very difficult course for me, but nothing was more rewarding than the fact that I could sit here today and tell you that almost 100,000 patients have now been treated with my CyberKnife, and like right now at this very given instance, there's probably several dozen patients worldwide getting treated. And so while my story has been a painful one, it's been one that I'm very proud of nevertheless.
Pretty amazing. So we've got these very different points of view here, and I want to try to ferret out what sort of things are similar and what sort of things are different in these different industries and your different paths. So let's just Trip. What did you learn from your dad? Here you grew up in this house where your father is a neurosurgeon and an entrepreneur. What did you see in these two different paths, and what was, I'm going to guess that you probably looked at both of those as inspiration for your own career.
Yeah, sure. I think when I was in college, I was probably didn't even really appreciate either of the paths. I mean, I was just too young to really understand what he was actually doing.
Too busy partying.
One way to look at it. I think I was always much more interested in the entrepreneurial path, and I think that just seeing my dad go through it gave me the confidence to actually go for it. Because most of my friends at Harvard thought it was just crazy to turn down a job that pays $100,000 a year or whatever you get in investment banking to do something like this. So, but I was willing to do it just because I had seen it work, and I had seen my dad take on much more risk than I was. I mean, most people think that the idea of from an Ivy League school of joining a 20-person startup is a very risky idea. And after seeing my dad, try to raise tens of millions of dollars and build this very complicated technology and do all this while having a family and a full-time job as a neurosurgeon, it made what we were doing seem really easy and risk-free. So just seeing that and learning from that was really inspiring and just made it easier to take that leap into the world of entrepreneurship.
Okay, so John, now your son
comes.
Okay, so John, your son calls you and says, "Okay, I'm going to go dive in. I'm going to do this." Were you enthusiastic? And when he decided to do it, what kind of guidance did you give him? I mean, was this something you said, "Yes, go for it. This is great"?
I was completely enthusiastic. I think we're both products of Silicon Valley, both products of Stanford. And I think no place in the world quite understands what entrepreneurism is like we do around here. And to be honest, I was a little worried. I didn't know what else he could do. He's a free spirit. He's very capable, but he's got an independent mind. And the nice thing about entrepreneurism, there's no rules. You make up the rules. And so I was incredibly enthusiastic. And my advice from him was always, even to this day, a very simple advice. And I said, don't give up the CEO position. I said, you create this business. And if I had learned a lesson over the years, was just the power vested in the CEO and the opportunity to kind of control the business, influence the business. And so I kind of expected from the early onset that all the wise heads and Sand Hill Road who write the big checks, they always want some gray hair or someone with no hair to kind of be making the decisions. But there's nothing like the passion and the energy and the understanding that a young entrepreneur CEO brings to the table. So I said, don't give it up. And I think that's one lesson that hopefully he's still taking to heart, I hope.
Yeah. So, Trip, is that useful advice?
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of young founders, I think, that I've already seen in my short 3-year career give up the CEO position and I think have it not work out too well. Just because when you're building a company in the early days, it's really all about, and this is the early days, but also when the company's huge, it's about just it's in a technology company, engineering and product. And usually the types of CEOs that get hired are usually not really specialists in that. They're specialists in everything but that. So it just doesn't really make sense to have somebody who doesn't understand that running the company. And the worst case is if that person has the wrong opinion on engineering and product. If the guy just sort of steps out of the way and lets the founder or the person who knows how to do that, that's great. But if if the CEO takes the product engineering in the wrong direction, then that usually destroys the company.
Okay, but both of you started these companies without any experience starting companies. So who did you look to for guidance? What sort of people did you surround yourself with who you could trust to give you advice about big decisions?
I think I gave him a little advice. I tried. And the reality, and I tried to give him so much advice because I had no advice. And I had very few people to turn to. And in hindsight, it was a very isolating experience to kind of be in charge of everything, and now times not even having responsibility, but being in charge nonetheless, and try to, without experience, kind of ultimately making decisions. And I mean, it really sounds stupid, but the most important business influence I've had in my life has been Warren Buffett, who I've never met, but who I've religiously read his annual reports. Because there's a guy who really believes that leadership in business is really common sense. It really is. It's common sense. And I feel too often it's been surrounded by mumbo jumbo with, organizational charts and management by objective and all kinds of logos and spin. And it really loses the leadership, the essence of the leadership that I think makes for great companies. And I only wish I was as blessed as Larry Page and Sergey Brin at a young age to have all that power and influence, and then have listen to Warren Buffett on the side telling you how to do all the right things. But so I stumbled along and did it learn these things by myself for the most part.
Yeah. What were the biggest hurdles along the way? I mean, were there places where you really could have used some guidance?
Oh yeah.
Is there something that sort of sticks out in your mind?
I mean, I literally spun my wheels for 4 or 5 years trying to raise money. And so a lot of it was just bad luck. I mean, the timing of my particular business and the nature of my business was such that we missed all the right cycles. We came in just at the wrong side of every cycle. And we shot ourselves in the foot a couple times too. And so it took me much longer to raise the sort of money I need to than I should have in hindsight. And had I maybe the right mentorship and access to the corridors of power early on, that would not have been so difficult.
Okay. So you had this father who had sort of paved a path for you in terms of getting some experience. First of all, I'm assuming that was really helpful. What other people did you go to for guidance?
In the earliest days, it was before the company's off the ground. It was basically just my dad because I didn't know anyone. But at a certain point, we started getting investors and pretty much pretty early on, basically everyone who was successful wanted to meet with me and my co-founders and try to advise and help us. So pretty quickly I got into the community and was able to get advice from a lot of different people. So that was probably something that was much easier for me than my dad. Just I was surrounded by all these people in Silicon Valley who wanted to help. But over time, I think I've come to listen to other people a lot less. I've realized that if you're an entrepreneur and you're really going to do something amazing, you can't just take direction from other people. You have to basically pave your own path and make all your own mistakes. I mean, that's ultimately how you learn, is you just try things and then you succeed or fail and just keep learning through trial and error. And at a certain point, other people can't teach you much. The only people I really get advice from these days are other successful founder CEOs. I talk to people who run companies much bigger than Scribd, and ideally people who actually grew the company from Scribd size to much bigger than Scribd.
And this is kind of after the fact, but I developed a patient. I encountered a patient 2 years ago, a guy named Stuart Moldow, who is really a giant of the retailing industry. He started Ross Dress for Less. He started Gymboree. I mean, this is a man who started 5 or 6 major companies they took public over the course of his career. And he was a very sick man. In fact, he died about almost a year ago. And but while I was caring for him, I had lunch with him many times. It was amazing to sit down with him, and instantly we could communicate. Instantly, I understood what he was saying. He understood what I was saying. And I really envious of the fact, or sad that I never had, when I was developing the company, had access to that kind of brains and insight.
So obviously, you don't run these companies by yourself. It's all about a team. How did you attract the right people to you, find the right people, build this team, motivate them? And especially when you've got something brand new that doesn't have any traction and you're going to get someone to follow your dream, maybe you could talk a little bit about that. How did you actually make that happen?
Yeah, well, as soon as we launched, we had a lot of traction. So it wasn't like there was any trouble attracting people. I mean, we had a long line of people who want to work at the company, and we still do. So, I mean, it was really just common sense. It was like, we needed someone to, manage support. So we just hired someone who came along who was good at it. And I think that, really it's hard. I'm a believer that you really have to, work with someone to really know what it's like, how they're going to perform. Interviews never really work that well. So, we just had to hire people and move forward and make decisions quickly.
So you just have had a line of people just at your door. I mean, how much of that has had to do with the economy or with, have you?
Well, the little segment of Silicon Valley I'm in hasn't been very affected by the economy. We're still seeing very strong revenue growth and traffic growth, and we raised around during the worst part of the recession. So it hasn't really been a problem for us.
Okay, so John, same story for you?
No, but it's I have advantages that Trip didn't have. And I can tell you that a lot of people are really attracted to working in the medical industry. It's just something personal, it's philosophical. In fact, I've developed some acquaintances over the last couple of years who are among the most successful people in the world, in the electronics world, who want to do a medical device startup with me because they really believe in the idea of medicine. They want to be close to patients, taking care of patients. And there's very few things as rewarding as seeing someone get treated with your particular instrument, your device that you've worked so hard on. And people are willing to sacrifice a lot for that. That being said, when I was CEO in 1999, 2000, in Silicon Valley was booming and you just couldn't hire engineers in any capacity, no matter who you were. I had a lot of trouble attracting employees, and because everyone was going to go down the street and start some startup, and a year or two later their options are going to be worth a couple $1 million. But for the most part, healthcare does give you an opportunity to attract quality people that you might not have in other industries.
So people who are motivated to really have an impact on these specific patients.
They're really passionate about the work they do.
Great. Now, we all know that there's hard work and there's luck, right? You can be working really, really, really hard and have just a bunch of bad things that happen to get in your way, or you can have these incredible lucky breaks. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of the lucky breaks that you've had over this time and give us some insights of how they impacted you.
Me? Well, my experience is filled with luck. And it was just a whole series, some of the worst luck possible in raising money. But outside of that, things happened that would have never, only divine intervention made this possible, in my view. Is that, I came to Silicon Valley. I could have never started this company anywhere else. The way I first got introduced to some of the key components was a patient came in who was actually completely schizophrenic, but insisted I meet a vendor of this key product, and I did it, kind of dumb luck. Again, not of any great insight of mine. The way I raised money, when I could raise money, it was really luck. Persistence, don't get me wrong, persistence was at the root of all of this, but luck was just been so fundamental to my individual story. And I didn't have a better context to put it. I used to just call it dumb luck or naivete. I didn't know really how to structure it. But then I listened to Steve Jobs' graduation or commencement talk, and he talks about how, in hindsight, you can connect the dots. And it's so completely true that Accuray is completely a story about having been able to connect the dots over the course of my life, going all the way back to when I was 30 years old, 29 years old. I was doing stuff that I thought was meaningless, but now, in hindsight, it gave me all the substrate to do what I've done over the last 25 years of my life.
Would you do it again?
You know what? Without a doubt, I'd do it again. The interesting question, if I did all this and I failed, would I do it again? And even in that case, I think I would do it. Even if I failed.
So Trip, you've had sort of this lucky star over you since you started this. Are there specific lucky moments that stand out as, boy, if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't have been able to get this traction. If that hadn't happened, wouldn't have been able to hire these people. If that hadn't happened.
Yeah, the time it felt like we just kept getting lucky. I felt like we were just the luckiest founders ever. But I think in retrospect, it wasn't really luck. We were just doing things right. So I think the fact that we figured out how to do it right early on, I would say was lucky, if that makes sense. So So I think that the fact that we got so much traction and actually had like all this traffic and all this interest within a year of starting to work on this kind of stuff was lucky. But if we hadn't had that luck, we would have figured it out eventually if we just kept trying.
But I'm going to interrupt you. I'm a huge believer that you make your own luck.
Yeah.
So how did you, as someone who knows a little bit about this space, how did you get so much traction so early on? I mean, I don't know that that's luck. I mean, that was something that so many people who start Web 2.0 companies try desperately to build that traffic. What was it that you did that made that happen?
Well, we just did a good job building the initial product and branding it and promoting it. I mean, we were really aggressive in promoting it on blogs and link filter sites like Dig and Delicious and those sites. So it was really about promotion that made it take off quickly. But I think that anyone can create that kind of traction. It's just that when people start Web 2.0 companies and fail, it's usually that they do it as a side project for 6 months, it doesn't work out, and then they quit. I mean, if you work on it full time for 5 years, if you're a smart person, you're actually working hard, I'm pretty sure you will get success. I mean, even some of the founders I know from Y Combinator who 3 years ago looked like they had no idea what they were doing, they looked like they were going to be complete failures. Most of them have quit and gone and gotten jobs. But the ones that have stuck with it, they're starting to get traction, and they're all raising money. So it's really just a matter of learning. Yeah, it's persistence, but you need to keep learning along that way.
One thing you told me when we were prepping for this interview was that you had 10 different ideas you were pursuing, and 9 of them you left on the side of the road, and this is the one you chose to pursue. I mean, how was that decision process?
Yeah, so we were just really willing to try different things and cut our losses. I mean, Jared and I spent over a year just trying different website ideas. Some of them we just discussed, some of them they actually built and launched and tried to grow and then couldn't, and we were just willing to try something and then start over. And it was that process of trial and error that really allowed us to understand what was going to work. And I think that, it was the fact that we were able to figure out something that was going to work in only a year and a half or however long it was, that was probably lucky. But I think if anyone just keeps working at it, after a few years, you will get some kind of traction.
So did you realize you were going through this sort of rapid prototyping process? Was this something you really articulated? I mean, also we've heard speakers like Eric Ries talking about the lean startup and getting things out and testing it. Did you articulate this, or was this something that just was very natural to you?
Yeah, we know what we were doing. I mean, I was, at the time, still pretty pessimistic. I was ready to give up and go get a job, which I think was the wrong type of thinking. I mean, that was a mistake. I would discourage anyone trying to be an entrepreneur from thinking that way, because that's what kills you. You just need to have faith that if you just keep trying and learning, you will get there. I mean, entrepreneurship is completely a learned skill. It's a bunch of skills you have to learn and put together. And once you get good at all those skills and you piece them together, you will be good at coming up with ideas and launching websites.
So John, looking back over this process, what things would you have done differently? What lessons have you learned through this process?
I don't know that I do a lot different. Not that I didn't make mistakes. But at the time, I probably acted rationally based on everything I knew. The biggest issue, the biggest question, and it's one that I continue to ask myself to this very day, is did I make the right decision stepping down from the CEO position when I did? And it's clearly much of my advice to Trip was predicated on the specific decision I made. And the reason I did it, though, is an interesting one and maybe unique to medicine. And that is because I think in medicine there's 2 types of leadership within a business. There's the leadership that kind of overrides the organization and dictates the product, blah, 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 blah. But you also need inside medicine an outward-looking leadership that kind of influences the medical community. Because you can make the best product in the world, but unless it wins acceptance in the medical community, you're not going anywhere. And I'd argue that you can see this in some ways even in Silicon Valley's best managed company, arguably, is Apple, where as powerful as the products are, we all love Apple products, big part of the strength of Apple is this community of rabid users who really just embrace what the Apple comes out with. And when I stepped down from the CEO position, it was to take over that influence, the position where I was trying to influence the greater medical community. And so that was a big decision on my part, but in doing that, I left a lot of power, I gave up a lot of power and a lot of ability to influence the organization. So it was, in the end, it was very good for the company and for my initial efforts. It may not have been that good for me personally. So was that a mistake or not? It's something I still question to this day.
Well, so let's dive into the companies now, right? I mean, we sort of talked about the founding them and these sort of big ideas, but you're now building your company. Are there things that you think about every day, like building the culture? I mean, are you thinking about that as you build the company, or are you just trying to get the product out the door? And if so, how do you go about doing that? You know, building the internal organization and that culture in the business.
Well, I mean, there's different styles of leading a company, and I am a very product-focused founder CEO. I mean, I really believe that if you just make the product good, everything else falls into place. So, you know, when I say there's like lines of people wanting to work for us and lines of, and all these investors trying to invest, I mean, I get an email from a venture capitalist like every 2 days now asking us if we want money, and we're not even raising money. And the reason why that's true is that we have a good product. And as long as you just keep focusing on a good product, you'll get users, and if you get users, you'll make money, and if you make money, then everyone wants to invest in you and work for you. So that's my attitude. So I'm just focused on that. In terms of building a culture, I personally haven't really thought much about it. Everyone tells us we have an amazing culture and they love working at our company. Perhaps my co-founders thought about this, but you know, I think that, you know, if you have a successful company, you're going to attract good people and everyone's happy. So my personal attitude is focus on the product, let everything else fall into place.
Okay, so the fact is the culture is something that takes care of itself if the company's successful.
Yeah, I mean, you could think about the culture, and you could, I mean, at this point, now that I've have some more experience, I have a better idea of what kind of people we look for, and I look for culture fits, and, you know, I might even hire someone even if they're, you know, they have a worse resume, but I think they're a really good culture fit, I'm more likely to hire them. But I think that that's of secondary importance to just building a good product.
I agree with Trip completely. I think you can maybe tweak culture at the margins, but ultimately the culture stems from your belief in the product and your core mission. And the one difference, again, with my particular business is that it's very outward-facing. I mean, you can make the best product in the world again, but unless the docs embrace it and actually learn to use it. I mean, I equate the CyberKnife to like a Stradivarius. You know, you're going to make the best violin in the world, but unless you have an Isaac Perlman or someone to kind of play the thing, you know, you're never going to know what it's capable of. So you really have to develop, including your culture, the physician community, and that was kind of my major contribution over the last 5 or 6 years to Accuray.
So it's interesting how many parallels there are. I mean, you'd sort of say, boy, this is almost the exact same parallel experience, except that you had a much harder time, John, you know, sort of raising money and getting traction. But, you know, besides that, it sounds like there's, you know, very parallel. I'm curious, here we have this highly regulated, high technology, capital intensive business. And here we have this Web 2.0, Wild West type of environment. I mean, what are the biggest differences do you see in these experiences?
Well,
I think, I think that my dad really, you know, he, the first step he had to get to was a much bigger step than we had to get to. I mean, our first step was building a website that let people upload a PDF, Word file, PowerPoint, and then showing it on the web in Flash. I mean, that was our first step, and that was basically, it took 3 people to get there. And, you know, we did that well, and then from there we iterate. And, you know, we raise a few $1 million, and then from there we build more features and attract more people, and it really has been going like one step at a time to go from nothing to 40 people and eventually to thousands of people where we're going. Where I think my dad had to get to take one really big leap forward to really get to a point where he could show any signs of success. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. Accuray was just a much, much more complex business. I mean, you know, as CEO, I had to learn about things like, you know, quality assurance. What do I know about quality assurance? I didn't even know what the word meant. Quality systems. I mean, how do you know about the FDA regulation? Not just the FDA, you got to know about the French regulatory processes. And then you got to get into, you know, different specialty organizations, which think differently. Neurosurgeons hate radiation oncologists, radiation oncologists hate neurosurgeons. And this is the world you kind of waded into. much less just figuring out how to make something from an engineering perspective, from a software and hardware perspective, which was complex in its own right. So it was a very complex business, and gave me as a CEO a lot of chance to learn a lot of different things. So it was exciting. But I can't, Trip and I, in this way, we're very different. We're in parallel universes. I don't know that the nature of our business has that much in common, other than trying to make a good product. Was
there a big benefit being a neurosurgeon doing this? I mean, could someone have been an engineer, step into the same role?
No.
Or how much did your background with a domain expertise, and actually having a practice allow you to do this?
I think it was vital. The reality is that you, as an engineer, you just don't have, you can't inspire the same measure of confidence in the medical community as you can if you're a physician. And in fact, not only that, I was out there in the front lines putting my own patients' necks on the line. And my patients, I might add, were there putting their necks on the line. But the fact that you had that measure of confidence in the product on my part meant a lot to prospective customers and to prospective patients. And I just don't think engineers would be in the same position. So that's what's unique about a medical company.
Very interesting. So I want to ask one last question to you before I open it up to Steve and his class and then the rest of you. So you can start thinking about questions that you'd like to ask. Is that what advice? I mean, here we have a room full of prospective entrepreneurs. In fact, many of them might have already started their own companies. What advice do you wish you had gotten, and what guidance would you give to them as they look ahead to this path? Besides not giving up the CEO spot.
Yeah. I mean, my advice is to really go for it. The way you're going to learn is through just trying it, and then you're failing or succeeding, and that's where you're going to learn. So you should just basically go for it. Classes like this are great, but they're really not going to be that helpful unless you're also working on something at the same time. Really, I would say you're going to learn while you're on the job, and then reading books on business and going to classes like this are just going to give you things to think about while you're on the job. So I would encourage you to just move forward. Don't be too afraid of failure. Don't be too afraid of having like a year on your resume where you didn't do anything. That seems to be how most, at least at Harvard, how everyone was. And I just wouldn't be afraid of that. Just go for it, and you will start learning quickly.
Okay, so basically just-in-time learning along the way. Just sort of as you dive in and you have a problem to solve, figure it out on the fly.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what you're saying. Okay, John, what do you think?
I agree. Their Stanford students are smart, right? They can learn. But I think that, once again, my son is right.
Always.
Don't be, it seems very intimidating, and the worst thing you can do is be intimidated. And so I think you need to listen carefully before you kind of jump in. But after a certain measure of listening, it calls for decisions and bold action. And then don't look back. Do not look back. Just keep going forward. And if you are bold enough, if you have that intrepid conviction to go forward, chances are, and I agree with Trip, chances are you're going to succeed. It may not everyone's going to produce a Google or a Microsoft or something, but you may produce a meaningful business, and that's in the end all that really matters. So I'd say go for it. And one other thing is there are no rules. There are no rules. And that's the scariest thing for a lot of entrepreneurs to understand. You kind of, what am I supposed to do? You can do whatever the hell you want. And you got to keep reminding yourself. So there are no benchmarks. Don't worry about it. It's okay. It's okay. Because out of the fact that there are no rules come great opportunities. And I think, Tina, one of your classes has shown that. So don't forget, there are no rules, and go for it.
Okay, I'm going to open up for Steve.
Thanks, Tina. So I'm Steve Blank. I teach 278, The Spirit of Entrepreneurship, the class that wraps around the ETL lectures. And our students are actually going to go and try to deconstruct these two businesses after class. So, Trip, the first question's for you. One of the nice things that entrepreneurs do after they're successful is reinvent history. So I'm going to ask you to roll back history a bit and try to remember when you started Scribd. Did you have a business model in mind, or was it get the product out, or did you have some plan to make money? What were you thinking, if you could remember, when you guys got the first version up? What was in your head?
Yeah, the we had thought about money. We had a list of ideas for how to make money, but really the challenge was getting users. It's the hardest challenge in a consumer web startup is getting users, especially a lot of users. There's a lot of these companies that are started by the flawless teams of executives from big companies, and they have like $70 million, and they have an amazing business model in mind, but then they launch their product and nobody actually uses it. So our goal was just to build this thing and get people using it, and then just iterate from there. And that's what we did.
And so just following up, if I can, so take us from your original, I think it was called YouTube for Documents strategy, till now. Take us through the pivots or the changes in your user or monetization strategies as you've gotten older, wiser, smarter, more users. What have you learned? And what's changed?
Yeah, well, we called ourselves the YouTube of Documents at first, which was a great way just to get people talking about us. It was just the easiest way to explain it. And we don't like to think of ourselves that way. At our core, that's basically what we still are. We're a way for people to take a PDF file, a Word file, a PowerPoint file, upload it to the web, and share it with people. But since then we've transformed into that same thing plus a bigger vision, which is to basically change publishing. We want to make it so that anyone can become a published author. So basically that means it's taking what we had before, but adding on more layers. So now people can actually sell written works. We're making it so you can read written works on many different mobile devices. We want people to be able to read anything on Scribd on an iPhone, a Kindle, and all the other 20 e-readers that are coming out. There's just it's still the same core idea. There's just a lot more to it, and a lot more users can do, and a much bigger vision to it.
Great. Last quick question for John. John, your experience as a surgeon versus your experience at entrepreneurship, where anything goes, that's not true when you're opening someone's skull, I assume, and therefore the learnings you had to do as an entrepreneur are almost orthogonal, it appears, to the ones as a neurosurgeon. What were the biggest surprises as an entrepreneur that were just like, whoa? Was it about channel or customers or partners?
I think it was the culture. Because the beauty of an operating room is the surgeon's word is God. And the surgeon says something and it's done. In fact, my wife likes to complain that when I get home, I pretend that my scrub nurse is all set to pick up, because that's the way life is in the operating room. You're king. And in the rest of the world, you have to persuade. In the business world, you have to persuade your partners, your employees, your customers that this is the right course of action, and it isn't just taken for granted because you, the surgeons, have spoken. So it's been a learning curve for me, and not that I couldn't do those things, but I just didn't have time for it initially. But over the years, I've learned that that's a very important part of the management process, of the leadership process of an entrepreneurial company.
Did that change the way that you act in the operating room? I mean, was there any sort of did you become a little less draconian in the operating room after having to persuade people in the business world?
But you have the wrong image. You have the wrong image. In the operating room, it's not like you're Attila the Hun, kind of being a jerk to everybody. No, but it's just that there's not a lot of discussion what the plan of attack is going to be. Everyone turns to you and says, "What do we do?" And you say, "This is where we're going," and there's no questions asked. Even in the face of many people's skepticism in the operating room, people just do it because the surgeon has spoken. In the business world, you do something and you haven't got people to buy into it. In the background, they're all stabbing your plan in the back. They're doing everything they can to undermine your plan because for some reason they think they have a better plan or they want to embarrass you or whatever. And when a patient's life is on the line, everyone knows that there's one person making a decision and that's the end of the story. It's very different where you have a more complex social dynamic in a business.
Great. Tina, you're going to open up.
Yes, I'm going to open up for questions to the class. Okay.
All right, so you talked about leadership being something that's common sense, and one of you has a degree in biophysics, the other one is a neuroscientist. So I was wondering, would you think that a young entrepreneur is better off with a technical degree in something like computer science, mechanical engineering, or even biophysics, or a degree related to the business, like a degree in business, a degree in management science and engineering? What's your take on that?
So I'm going to repeat the question because we don't have a mic. So the question is it better to have a degree in some domain such as biophysics or neuroscience, or is it better to get a degree in business and management to prepare you for a leadership position?
If the company is going to be in computer science or engineering, I think it's absolutely better to have a degree in the domain knowledge than to just have a business degree. And in fact, I think that the MBA is a great disadvantage to kind of entering the engineering business than a technologist such as you're suggesting. That then again, if it's going to be a business oriented, on sort of a new way of delivering flowers or something, yeah, maybe a business degree would be better off.
What do you think, Trip?
I'd say definitely technical degree. I mean, even if your job isn't related to that science you're studying, I mean, it's still really useful to know science. I mean, I study physics, and I actually haven't studied any computer science. I don't program at all. But just having studied physics allows me to think very analytically, and it allows me to just really think about, how Scribd grows and how our users act. And I even use a lot of physics in explaining like the way Scribd works. It's much harder to learn a technical field than to learn to learn this kind of stuff you learn in like business school. So I mean, I mean it's like you can learn that stuff later in life. I mean, learning physics in college or computer science is really, really hard. So if you can do that, you'll be able to learn the business stuff down the road.
Great. Okay, next question. Yes.
So as you guys were focusing on your ventures, did you find that there were other interesting opportunities that came up, and did you have to lock down on that specific part of your life and sort of leave other opportunities, whether they're business related, whether they're personal opportunities through that time? Did you have to focus on one thing only, or did you have 2 or 3 things going on, whether there were other projects or other relationships or whatever?
Okay, so the question is, here you are focused on starting this company. Were there lots of opportunities that were circulating around in your life that you had to eliminate because you needed to focus on this venture?
Yes. I mean, I think a successful entrepreneur is very focused, and you do give up many dimensions of your life to go very deep into one area of your life. You try to be a father. You try to fulfill some of your family expectations. In my case, I was a neurosurgeon at the same time, and there wasn't a lot of left over. And in fact, I kind of mistrust a lot of people who try to do 3 entrepreneurial startups at the same time. Maybe there's some people who can do that, but I think in general, you're doomed to failure, and you're best off fixing your sights on something that is, manageable, and focus all your energy on it and driving only that across the finish line before taking something else on.
But you were both acting. I mean, you were an acting surgeon and the CEO at the same time, or not?
No.
Okay, so why don't you clarify?
I was chief medical officer for 6, 7, 8 years. Then I was CEO for 3 years. Then I've been basically chief medical officer for about 5, 6 years.
And how did this parallel your neurosurgery?
When I was chief medical officer, I was practicing neurosurgery. When I was CEO, I was just a full-time CEO.
Okay. Next question. Yes, John.
2 questions for Trip. One, how does your company make money? What's your revenue model? And second, have you had any inquiries from companies who might be potentially interested in acquiring you?
Okay, so the question is, Trip, what's your revenue model? What's your business model? And do you have any acquisitions in your future?
So about revenue, we have ads on the website, and we get some of the best CPMs on the internet. The reason is a lot of people on Scribd are searching for things, so we show them ads related to what they're searching for, and then we get really good advertising. And there's other models. We have the Scribd store. It lets people buy and sell content. It lets publishers sell content. And we're about to roll out about 5 new business models in the next couple quarters. So there's a lot of things we do to make money. Second question, yeah, we get acquisition interest all the time. But we're really just focused on building a big company. So we have lots of conversations. We have some biz dev conversations going on with big companies. But in generally try not to let that distract us too much and just try to build a big company.
Cool. Next question. Yes.
Trip, I was just curious, when you initially starting, how you sort of dealt with compensation for your employees, particularly with respect to equity. I mean, I just feel like that's kind of an awkward conversation, or it could be, and I was curious how you handle that and how it actually played out.
So the question is, how do you deal with compensation for your early employees related to salary and equity?
Well, pre-raising funding, it was just, there was no salary, it was just equity. And yeah, it's a pretty awkward conversation you have to have with your co-founders. In general, I believe in splitting it as evenly as possible. That way you'll have a much better relationship down the road, and make sure everyone is equally motivated. So that's my advice on that. And then once you raise money, then you can start paying people salaries, and we just paid market rates.
Can I recommend that? Make sure you know, though, who you're giving all this equity away to. I mean, the beauty of Trip's startup is Trip knew very, very well who his senior partner was going into this, and so he believed in and trusted him. There's nothing more painful than to give a good dollop, huge dollop of founder's equity to somebody who's a complete dud, and that can destroy your company at some point in the future.
So, John, why don't you answer that question, too, about how did you deal with equity and salaries early on?
Very naively. I mean, the reality was that I was the heart and soul and energy and vision for the whole company, but I was young and was surrounded by guys who were all 20 years older than me, and I figured, well, they must know a lot because they're older than me, and so they end up getting a disproportionate amount of the equity. And in the end, though, the only one stuck doing the work was me. So I didn't have the equity, but I was most committed to the project. But of course, Accuray we ended up having a washout round, and so it was a business long and difficult financing history. It made some of those early equity grants kind of irrelevant. But I do think for many of you guys who are thinking about maybe a Web 2.0 startup with some friends or with a small group of people, Trip's experience is really very relevant to what you might be thinking about in the future.
Next question. Yep.
So this is for Trip. You said that most of the advice you get nowadays is from other entrepreneur CEOs, people who have started companies that have gotten to Scribd size and have gone larger. I was wondering what's the best advice you've received from them in order to grow larger than you are now?
So the question was, you mentioned, Trip, that you get a lot of advice, or the only advice from successful CEOs. What's the best advice you've gotten?
I don't know if it's the best advice, but one of the consistent pieces of advice I get from people build really big companies is to have a vision and to trust your vision and to not sway from that. Because as the company gets much bigger, it gets really hard to keep everybody somewhat aligned. And everyone has their own sort of plan and direction they want to take things. And just really sticking to one vision and having a long-term perspective on that too. I mean, it's really easy to let other people influence you. I mean, I've really learned to trust my own instinct over the last few years. I mean, some of the biggest mistakes I made were when other people were telling me what to do, particularly older, more experienced people with very good track records, and I just said, oh, this person is 20 years of experience, they must know what they're talking about. But that's usually when you make the biggest mistakes. I mean, ultimately, you need to really follow your own internal vision. You should listen to other people and hear what they say, but in the end, you need to make your own decisions.
Let me ask you, both of you are incredibly confident at this point in trusting your gut. Is this something you always have done? Have you always felt as though you've had good judgment? Because, there's some people whose judgment might not be the same as yours. I mean, is this something that every founder should trust their gut? Or it's just people who have, a good track record?
Yeah, I think I've gotten much better at trusting my gut. When I was a young college student, I think I was too influenced by everyone else around me, and I had to learn through mistakes not to listen to other people. That sounds weird. But I think that once you start actually coming up with your own idea, implementing it, and seeing what happens, you start to get a good internal sense of when you're right and when you're wrong, and you just get better at it over time.
John, what about you?
I think what Trip said is very true, and it's very real. And maybe it took me even longer. I mean, I was very confident in my judgment as a neurosurgeon, but I was far more intimidated by kind of the big names in the business world who are all these professional managers who wrap decisions in a lot of business talk. And I shouldn't have been, because the end of business is really very simple. Make a product that your customer base really wants, and you'll be successful. So I say yes, trust your gut.
But it's not that you're or not that I'm saying I'm smarter than these experienced people telling me what to do. It's just that they don't have the same experience that I have and the same view of the company that I have. I understand the company better than all these people who just like check out the website for an hour and then tell me what to do. So it's really just everyone has to kind of figure it out for themselves and the path they're going down. And even early on, like if you just trust your instinct, you are going to mostly make mistakes, but you're going to be learning along the way. So pretty soon you will develop a good sense of what to do.
I say it's trust your gut within your area of domain. I mean, I'm not here to tell you whether you should buy electric cars or hybrids or something or diesels or something, But within the realm of my world of neurosurgery, I've come to appreciate that, damn it, I know as much as anybody in the world. No, I know more than anybody else in the world. And in this area, I will have strong opinions. In this area, this is where my vision is going to prevail.
Really good point. Question back there.
So you said, just to follow up on that question, you said you were part of Y Combinator, and I know they do a lot of mentorship and advisorship type of stuff. And so I guess back from your perspective, starting out like before when you were first starting out Scribd, what exactly did you get out of a program like that?
I think the best thing out of it was that there were a lot of other people my age running companies. So I mean, one of my dad's biggest problems, as he was saying, is he didn't have a lot of people around him he could talk to. So Y Combinator kind of feels like a school for startups. I mean, the same way you guys are in school and you meet all these your peers, at Y Combinator you're going to meet a lot of other people starting companies. So we actually met our third co-founder named Tikon through Y Combinator. He was part of a different company. So that community was the best part. They also give you a lot of really good advice on the really early part of a startup. So splitting equity with co-founders and getting incorporated, those kinds of things. I think I pretty much went into Y Combinator having a good sense of all that, probably because I have my dad. But if you didn't grow up in Silicon Valley and have that kind of people influencing you, Y Combinator is a good thing.
Now it's interesting. You mentioned Silicon Valley. Obviously, you went to Harvard and you came out here. Now we certainly know some other models of companies where that's happened. People graduating from Harvard and coming out to Silicon Valley. Was that very conscious decision that if you're going to launch this company, you want to be here?
Yeah, I mean it was a combination of this being a better place to be, and also just I didn't really like Boston and want to come back to California. So yeah, I mean, in general, Silicon Valley is a much better place to be to start a company, just because there's a much more entrepreneurial mindset around here. I mean, just the mindset of like Stanford versus Harvard is totally different.
Well, John, you mentioned you couldn't have done this anywhere else.
That's right. And I mean, I think that Harvard's filled with brilliant people, and it just kills innovation after innovation. And I think all this, yeah, it does. I'm very critical of Harvard. It's got too much money, and it's there to kill innovation. And historically, I think that Stanford has really kicked its butt. And so it's no surprise that a lot of the smart, young, innovative people from Harvard have come out here to this area.
Great.
It's in the war.
Okay, next question.
For Trip, along the lines of taking advice, to what extent will you say that you and your co-founders take advice from your users and potential users?
I'd say that we, just like all advice, you take a lot of advice, but in the end you need to make the decision on where you want to go. I mean, this is kind of Apple's perspective on things. You can't really ask users what they want, because users are going to say, I want a button on this page, lets me do this. But if you just take all users' advice, you get a kind of messy product. So you really need to have a vision for where you want to go and just build that, and then tell your users, this is what you're going to use. I mean, you can learn from your users, and actually most of the learning comes from analytics, just looking at what people are actually doing. And that influences your decision, but in the end, if you listen to your users too much, you build a bad product.
Do you find that the users often tell you things that are quite different than what they show they're doing in the analytics?
I don't think so. I mean, often the users who give you feedback are the most vocal users, and usually the most vocal users are not your typical users. So you have to be really careful about who you're listening to. I mean, you can easily get in the trap of just listening to your most vocal users, and then you build a product for a really small niche that isn't really what the world needs.
So John, let me ask you the same question. I mean, here your users are, very, very different, but I'm going to guess you spent a lot of time listening to them. How important was their feedback and their guidance on the product as you were building it?
So I feel the same as Trip. I think all products are the same in some respects. I mean, I can't have too strong a feeling about how one should do liver surgery, but I do know a lot about surgery. And so at the end, if you love your product enough, you as the innovator, you as the entrepreneur, the love will show through that product. And in it will be simplicity, and in it will be the effectiveness and ultimately what your user base wants. So listen carefully what the world has to say, but in the end, make decisions. And in that sense, neurosurgery is good training.
Another question? Yes.
In the beginning, did you outsource, say, your accounting, your servers, or John, for your parts? Were you doing just in time in the beginning? Was everything already out there? And you just pieced it together to make what you needed?
Is this for Trip?
Well, actually,
for both.
The outsourcing, I think, can be used for both.
Okay, so the question is, how much outsourcing did you do for different services, whether it was accounting or servers, so that you didn't have to bring it in-house?
We didn't do much, but we were all full-time on this, and I was, since I didn't go to business school or anything, I didn't know anything about accounting, so it was a good chance for me to learn something about accounting. So I, bought QuickBooks and set it up myself. But in the end, it doesn't really matter whether you outsource those kinds of things or not. What matters is that you do the core part of your business in-house. So if you're a website, that you actually build the product in-house, I think is really important. So just don't outsource the core thing you do well.
I echo what my son has to say. I could have never started my business without kind of outsourcing many aspects of it. In fact, some of the major key components were vital to getting the business going. If I had to make those key components, the business would have never gotten started. So most of what Accuray was at its onset was a systems integration business. And yes, we did outsource accounting for a while, outsource legal, but the core of the product, which was the software, and then some of the minor hardware components really were at the heart of what our business was all about.
One last question. Yep, back. Oh, I'll take two. Okay.
Excuse me. One of the things that always seems to be trouble is you come up with a great idea in an early product, and then somebody really big says, yeah, I can do that too. How do both of you stay ahead of the competition, especially the big players?
The question is, how do you stay ahead of the competition?
Yeah, I think you need to learn to just not pay any attention to the competition. Usually the best companies are very internally focused, and they're just focused on doing their own thing and not worrying about the big guys. And in the end, you'd be surprised how often the small companies beat the big companies. Usually the big companies have a very different way of thinking about it. So I would just ignore what the big companies are doing.
I also think that big companies have kind of a muddled view of where the opportunities lay. And I'm a big believer in Christensen's book, The Innovator's Dilemma, which talks a lot about how big companies and established companies tend to focus too much on their current customer base, trying to keep them happy, while a new company, and Accuray was very much in this domain, sees a little niche market just outside of where the core constituency of the established industry was, and does everything to address this little niche market, which over time grows and then subsumes the original market that from which it originally sprung. And so I think that if you can kind of see yourself addressing a niche market, and focus on make that niche market happy. If you make the niche market happy, establish any market, then eventually you can grow from there. So we started with a niche market, and we've been growing from that.
Great. And last question.
This is for Trip. I noticed on Scribd you posted your business plan for $10,000. My question is, have you had a lot of takers on that? And do you think it's worth it for an entrepreneur to buy your business plan for $10,000?
Okay, so the question is, you've got your business plan posted on Scribd for $10,000. Any takers, and how valuable do you really think it is?
Yeah, we leave the sales information confidential, so I can't say, actually. And yeah, you guys should, maybe Stanford should buy it and pass it around. There's no DRM on it, so you guys can.
Let me ask you a question. If I read that business plan, how close is it to what you're doing now? We often think of business plans as the best works of fiction because as soon as you get it written down, things are changing, the context is changing so fast. How close is it to what you're doing now?
It's surprisingly close, actually. But in the end, it doesn't really matter too much. Coming up with business plans is easy. Actually, building the business is much harder. So, if you're starting a business, I would spend like a weekend writing the business plan and then just put it on Scribd for sale for $10,000 and move on.
So John, let me ask you, was your business, if we looked at your original business plan, how different or similar was it to what actually ended up happening?
Well, the steps to make the product and to use it in patients and to commercialize were actually, not too far off the mark. The scale over which it happened was dramatically changed. I mean, everything took, the rule of pi. Everything takes 3.14 times as long as your engineers say it will. So yeah, it just took much longer.
Well, I just want to end by thanking you so much. This was fascinating to see the similarities, the differences, and I have to tell you, I personally am really surprised by the number of similarities and really delighted by the fact that you were willing to share all this with us. So thank you very, very much.
A lot of fun. Thank you.